Hi, welcome to our EDES100 presentation about a learning scenario. It was done by myself, Jasmine Tweddle O'Donnell, and Madeline Crisp. The scenario that we were given was Dana, who was a thriving Year 11 student, began to struggle in Year 12, and eventually it led her to believe that she couldn't get the marks to get into the uni course that she wanted to, which was forensic science. She also had a boyfriend, and that deteriorated and they broke up, but they stayed friends. Her parents were getting a divorce, she wasn't sleeping and she wasn't eating, and she also had to work a part-time job to stay for university. Through all of that, she maintained that she was doing okay. However, she eventually did get support from the counsellor after advice from her teacher that was concerned about her, and they came up with a plan which was basically for her to take a gap year after school and look at other science courses. So if we want to understand Dana and apply different learning theories and motivation theories, first we've got to understand what motivation is. So motivation is defined as an internal state which influences, drives and maintains behaviour. Now, like my little diagram, it encompasses the values, beliefs, goals and needs of an individual. And the reason why I put the little trees in the background is that we need to be able to understand a person's environment and context surrounding those components to better understand what motives and behaviours that person is going to adopt. So within motivation, you kind of have different types. There are three types. The first one is A motivations. I've put a little sloth in there. It doesn't want to do anything. It's not motivated by anything, has no desire or effort to engage in the activity or behaviour. So an example is just not engaging with any coursework at all. Secondly, we've got intrinsic or internal motivation. So that's the desire that comes from within to do that activity or do that behavior. So again, with this example of, doing uni work, say internal motivation or intrinsic motivation would be, I want to do this uni work because I just want to become more knowledgeable about this area or this topic. And then finally, you have extrinsic motivation, or external. So that comes from the outside of the individual. So again, with studying for uni, that motivation would be, I want to get a HD. So that's why you study hard for the exam or the essay. Another good example of extrinsic motivation is going to work to get paid. So to better understand Dana's circumstances, there are different learning theories, and those learning theories impact views on motivation. And they're really important for us as teachers to understand so we can apply them to circumstances and, try to help kids, gain more motivation or give them some direction in their life. So the first theory that we're going to look at is the social cognitive motivation view, and this theory explores the role of social environment that plays on a person's motivation, learning and self-regulation. So from this perspective, it involves looking at the outcomes of behaviour and the effects of personal thinking while understanding the influence the environment has on that person. With Bandura, he created some very good models, and within social cognitive theory and looking at motivation, there's been other models to developed to improve the outcomes for students or for people in general to increase their motivation. So we'll look at some of these models and build from here. So one of these models is the triarchic reciprocal causation model. So in the model, you have three key factors: your personal factors, your behavior processes, and your environmental factors. And it's a reciprocal relationship between them. So say personal factors are affected by and affect environmental factors and behavioral processes. So it's that back and forth it's not one directional basically, and it's ever changing. One thing that I want to note, and what we're going to further discuss, Shunk and Din Bandito's article, they highlighted goals and self-efficacy as key factors in instigating and maintaining motivation. And so this is why for Dana's, when we want to apply it to Dana's situation, I'm going to go more in depth about those things. But if you have a look at the presentation slides, like personal factors includes beliefs, attitudes, values. Environmental factors include feedback, models, social models, rewards, physical settings, behaviors, actions, persistence, achievement, choices. So there's so much going on, and they all interact with each other. And that's what makes it so complex, but it also makes it really easy to see where things might break down. So firstly, we're going to look at goals and motivation, and this was specifically highlighted in Shunk and Dan Detto, which I'm butchering their article. They highlighted the importance of this. Now, a goal is a desired outcome which a person is trying to achieve, and it can initiate and direct motivation outcomes. However, the article did highlight that it may not result in action, which then impact motivational outcomes. So a goal may spark, oh, I want to achieve this, I want to head in this direction. However, you may not get there, like the motivation may still lack. And this is because of how you set goals. So if you set a goal that's attainable, specific, timely, and measurable, you're more likely, your motivation to achieve that goal is going to increase. However, if the goal is broad, vague, difficult to achieve, you're going to be less motivated. And even if you set a really long-term goal, it's really hard to stick to that because you can't see the little steps, the progress steps. So an example of a specific goal, a student potentially will have a better outcome if they go, I want to receive an A in English for term 1, okay? Because they're not saying I want to achieve A for the whole year or A for term 1 in all subjects. It's like A for English just in term 1. So it's a bit more specific, it's timely, it's measurable, and it makes it more attainable. However, it is important to note that social cognitionists believe that self-efficacy has more influence over motivation than goals. So Bandura, who developed these ideas, had an article on self-efficacy and showed the relationship between behavior and thinking and how it impacted motivation. So self-efficacy is a person's perceptions on their own ability to learn or perform a task at a certain level. Therefore, motivation is influenced by a person's own perception of their competency. So if you look at my little models, they show what increases motivation, what decreases. So self-efficacy is kind of got 4 components to it. So one is performance accomplishment. So if you've had previous success, you'll be more motivated. Previous failure, less motivated. Vicarious experiences. So if you see others succeeding around you, it makes you go, oh yeah, I can do this. And so motivation increases. If everyone else is struggling, well, your motivation to try and thrive isn't going to happen. Social persuasion. So if you get feedback, you can do it. Up goes your motivation. Feedback, you struggle with this topic. Okay, don't worry, I won't even try. And then finally, physiological and emotional indexes. So if you have low anxiety towards a task, or you don't really get stressed by exams, you're going to have more motivation to try to study for that exam. Where if you're high anxiety, stress, not eating, not sleeping, your motivation is going to decrease. I also just want to point out, in my first year of uni, I did psychology subjects, and I actually did an essay on self-efficacy, grit, and intrinsic motivation and its influence over academic performance. And from the research that I did and the essay I wrote on it, there was a moderate relationship between self-efficacy and academic performance. And the reason why it was a moderate relationship, because there was other factors that influence the strength of the relationship, which I think is just really, I just thought it was a good thing to note, because, you know, when we look at the triarchic causation model, you can see all the other things that could affect self-efficacy. So I just thought it was a very important thing to speak about. Expectancy value theory is also another way of explaining and characterizing a social cognitive view of motivation. Basically, it's expectancy times the value, where the value has a cost involved. So expectancy, that involves self-efficacy, and the person will ask themselves, can I reach this goal? If they think they can, their motivation increases. If they think they can't, motivation decreases. Then obviously times the value. So I find this rewarding versus I don't find this rewarding. Okay, so that's a value. And within value, I read it as plus or minus the cost. So cost involves all those external things, all the environment and the contextual things. So I have time. If you have time, energy, support, you've got a bit of intrinsic motivation, like I want to prioritize this, then that's going to increase your motivation. However, if you don't have time, energy, support, or you want to, you know, maybe sport, if we're thinking about studying, maybe sport's more of a priority, or your friends, then your motivation is going to decrease. So by understanding a social cognitive view of motivation and understanding the theories involved with it and the models, we can better understand our students' performance or our students' lack of motivation, and try to work with them and adopt strategies to work with them. So I'm going to apply all this now to Dana's situation, so we can better understand what's going on in her world, and then I will come up with some strategies that we could hopefully use to help her out. So let's look at a social cognitive perspective on Dana's motivation, and let's apply some of these models. So I'm starting off with the triarchic reciprocal causation model. And because there's so many components to Dana, I've kind of just picked out bits and pieces, and you can see the relationship between them. So obviously we see the deterioration in her self-efficacy. So her belief that she can get the grade to get into the forensic science starts to decrease in year 12, okay? And then we can see that relationship with environmental factors. So her teacher sits down with her to support her, which is a great thing. However, also communicating that she isn't performing as well. So maybe that conversation here shouldn't compare her to how she was going last year, because that's just reaffirming in her mind that I can't get into forensic science, like I can't achieve that anymore. And then a behavioural process, obviously we can see these all interacting. Her motivation doesn't change or kind of decreases. Like she's like, okay, I can't get into forensic science, I've got to change things. And yeah, we can see the impact of all three, and you just see how they're reciprocal relationships, like they all intertwine together. Now, I'm now looking at this at more of the emotional side of what's going on with her. So in the background, in her context, in the background of her year 12, we've got her parents are getting a divorce, and she's also going through her own breakup. So you can only imagine the emotions, so the personal factors, her emotions that she's going through. She's probably feeling sad, depressed, lonely, isolated. And then we see that reflect in her behavioural processes, where she's not eating and she's not sleeping. So she doesn't even have the effort to give herself the basic needs. So how is she going to have the effort to apply herself at school? Again, with this second one, more on the emotional state, you can see how they're all interacting with each other. And then, you know, if you combine both situations together, that's you can see why her motivation is so low and how things are not working for her, even though she says that she's fine. So now we'll break down her learning issues in terms of goals, self-efficacy, and expectancy value theory. So she has multiple goals, and they're broad and long-term, which might reduce her motivation. So she wants to study forensic science at uni. However, she also goal is to pay for university. And another goal is maintain a relationship with her boyfriend. And that could have been a goal at some point in year 12 before that broke down. So there's all her goals. They're very conflicting. A lot of them are broad. They're also really big, weighty, heavy goals. So you can see, like, you would be overwhelmed with those types of goals. And then we've got her self-efficacy. So her performance accomplishments start to decrease. Her teacher provides her feedback. However, it reconfirms her poor performance accomplishments. And then she's not eating or sleeping due to emotional indexes. So like the emotional indexes that we looked at, like she's not eating or sleeping due to the emotional toll of everything going on in her life. So of course her motivation is going to decrease. And then to understand, I think it's really good using the expectancy value theory. So to understand her decision process with all of this going on. I want to study, but I also got to work part-time to pay for uni. Okay, I can't study as I'm emotionally drained from my parents' divorce. So we can clearly see this theory and kind of equation shows how her motivation can decrease. So how can we support Dana? Firstly, improve her self-efficacy. So I think the conversation that she had with the teacher where he did kind of compare how she was going in year 11, maybe as teachers we don't compare. We just go check in. How are you going with your work? Do you want to improve? But like come at an angle of like, you know, if they go, oh yeah, I'm really like not going as well, well, how can I help you improve and get to where you want to be? And then that might lead you to sit down with her and go through her goals. And, you know, instead of it's like, I want to get into forensic science, well, okay, what marks do you need to achieve that? Okay, let's sit down and make these goals more specific, more attainable. So we might need you to get an A in science. Okay, so let's break that down further. How are we going to get an A? What were you doing last year differently? It might open up that conversation and reduce that kind of, oh, well, you're not doing as well as what you were in year 11. So then that belief of that self-efficacy belief of like, oh yeah, I am doing really badly is reinforced. So I think just coming at a different angle. And then another thing is that it's really important to improve motivation by gaining mastery. So maybe the teacher needs to give her tasks that are a bit more achievable to regain her confidence and again achieve mastery like she was in year 11. Now, the other part of this, I really believe as teachers is part of this and this theory is the emotional support. So her context and environment is really challenging. And the reason why I picked social cognitive theories, I really resonated with it. And I resonated with this learning issue because I experienced a very similar thing. I had different emotional stuff going on in the background, but I remember in year 12, in one of my chemistry exams, I was top of the class and I had anxiety in the exam and ended up getting 30%. And the teacher pulled me aside and asked what was going on. I remember I would read multiple choice questions like 5 times and didn't understand what they were saying. And I didn't realize that was anxiety and that I could have gone to the doctor straight after the exam and actually got a medical certificate for that. So she might be experiencing some of that and she's not aware of how it affects your learning and stuff. So I think emotional support, she did get to see a school counsellor, but maybe there needs to be a conversation between a trusted teacher, the school counsellor, maybe even the parents, and see if she wants to go to a psychologist to better understand her feelings and stuff. So yeah, as teachers we do play an important role, but I think 2 key elements in Dana's scenario is improving her self-efficacy, which is going to improve her motivation, and then gaining that emotional support to improve all the stress that is going on in her life.
The next type of motivation we'll be talking about is the cognitive approach to motivation. Cognitive motivation is often driven by an individual's goals, expectations, schemas, and attributions, according to Markets in 2023. This approach has an emphasis on intrinsic motivation and contends that an individual's behaviour is reliant on their way of thinking and their frame of mind. This contrasts drastically to the behaviourist perspective, where an individual's behaviour is believed to be the result of whether they've been positively or negatively rewarded or punished for the behaviour in the past. Weiner's attribution theory from 2000 influences the way in which learners interpret their surroundings. This can impact how they may address a particular situation based on their mindset and how they perceive what's going on around them. Contextualizing the attribution theory, it can be broken up into two different sections, either the uncontrollable ability or what's considered a controllable cause. Subject to an individual's circumstances, here are two potential outcomes that the attribution theory may result in and be experienced by a learner. The uncontrollable ability is considered as the state where one's lack of ability is considered to be failure. It follows the structure of a student experiencing failure and then going on to believing they're not capable of doing any better than what they failed in, and therefore not taking responsibility for their poor result. This will result in them no longer trying, believing it would be pointless to study or to revise for a test or an assignment because they believe that they're deemed to fail no matter what they do, and then will end up in their performance declining because they're not putting any effort in anymore, just believing that they'll fail no matter what. On the other hand, a controllable cause is described as when failure is attributed to a lack of effort. It follows the structure of a learner experiencing failure and believing it was due to a lack of effort they may have put into studying or revising. This then goes on to them acknowledging that they have a responsibility for studying and therefore putting in more effort in revising and paying attention in class to ensure that they do better on their next test and therefore their performance improving in the next assignment. Next, I will outline the differences between the cognitive approach to learning versus the behaviourist approach of learning. Cognitive theorists contend that the mind has a very significant role in learning and see humans as active contributors into their knowledge. Cognitive theorists also recognise that there is a developmental difference between different learners, and individuals can process information in different ways and at varying speeds as well. On the other hand, behaviourists only acknowledge the role of behaviour in learning. They have the belief that students are passive learners and therefore only learn as a result of positive reinforcement or punishment. Next, I'll be talking about cognitive motivation and specifically in reference to Dana's situation. Dana reflects the intrinsic motivation when she is driven to achieve high marks. She continuously works hard on her studies despite her personal challenges. Throughout her parents' separation, she continues to focus on her studies and motivates herself to continue working hard in all of her subjects, in spite of her grades declining, which does lead her to require additional catch-up sessions with her teacher. In accordance with intrinsic motivation often being goal-oriented, Dana exhibits her drive to attain high grades stems from the objective of her wanting to complete the university course that she's really interested in. Hence, Dana pushes herself academically to ensure she's capable of being accepted into this course and furthermore excelling in the said course. Now we'll be linking Dana's situation to Weiner's attribution theory. The controllability is something measured by one's ability to control the outcome of a scenario. With reference to Dana and her struggles at school, attribution theories may consider her having either an uncontrollable ability or a controllable cause, dependent on what her frame of mind was at the time. If Dana considered her ability uncontrollable. It would mean that she believed she was the reason that she's doing poorly in school and that she is incapable of achieving high grades or achieving success in the classroom. Weiner contends that if an individual believes that they are incapable of doing something, it will drive them to put little to no effort to it into the future. And if Dana had already concluded that her hard work is not worthy of high grades, it's very unlikely that she will try to improve her marks for her next assignment because she's already anticipating failure. On the other hand, if Dana considered her failure a controllable cause, she would be able to interpret her troubles in school as the result of a lack of effort being put into her assignments. The attribution theory would expect Dana to work even harder in preparation to her next assignment, using the negative consequence being a low result on her last test as motivation to study even harder, therefore acquiring a higher mark on her next. This controllable scenario portrays Dana as a student who sets herself mastery goals, using her disappointing mark to drive her to set a goal that would result in the enrichment of her studies and the ability to grasp a much better understanding of the school curriculum at hand.
So, as teachers, it's really important that we understand how motivation works and also learning theory to understand and unpack students' well-being, students' motivation, and to understand them better. Even as adults, we struggle, and as educators, we're meant to be a support network for students if we build the right relationships with them, obviously. So building the right relationships and then understanding things that they have going on in their life can really help you to develop strategies to improve an individual or the classroom's motivation. So even though there's different approaches, having a vast knowledge of all the different approaches means that you have a lot of tools in your kit to approach different students, because not all students are the same and they might need different motivational tools to improve their motivation. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Now, I know you may notice that it is significantly shorter. We unfortunately had 2 group members that didn't pull their weight. They actually messaged 3 hours before I had asked for them to complete work by so we could submit it. I have been experiencing a concussion, so I have special considerations. This is why we got an extension for this assignment. And Maddie and I both wanted to do more work, but I had no capacity to take on any more load. My brain, I was still experiencing really bad symptoms. I still am experiencing really bad symptoms. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to pick up the 50% of load that Maddie needed. And unfortunately, I don't think it's fair that Maddie would have to pick up 75% of this assignment to cover all 4 of us. So that's why we only have the 2 learning theories. As I said, it wasn't what we planned. We got a week extension because of my concussion, but you'll see in the review how it kind of went. And I just would hope that myself and Maddie don't get penalized, because I honestly did not have the capacity to take on extra load, and it's not fair to Maddie to have to take on 75% of this assignment.